But the interesting thing was I walked in with my mother and father, and my father had to carry me out. Oh. So I never walked again that way. I do twirls and things, and every accident I've ever had, alcohol was involved. Money is not the most important thing in the world, but it sure keeps the kids close. It was such a rewarding feeling to help them and be there for them, and be there at the very moment that the crisis in their life was taking place. If I'm vertical and can fog a mirror, I'm gonna be out. And I tell friends, if you find me home on Friday night, better call witness because something ain't right.
I've heard it's also important to have tickets for the right night.
God, they did tell you everything. She said they'd have pictures of you being drug out of the tea room, the Dahlia, Oakwood. All of a sudden I went, what was I thinking? My wife said I couldn't remember what she told me this morning, but I could remember a joke I heard 35 years ago. So humor is so important. In life, in marriage, everything.
Especially in marriage. Welcome once again to No Holds Barred. I'm Rich Roth, and my guest today is none other than...
Chip Harvey.
The man, the myth, and the legend.
I don't know about all of that.
Chip Harvey. Most people know you, of course, as a State Farm agent. You've been that for
56 years.
Most of your life.
And my father was an agent, so I grew up with State Farm.
You grew up with State Farm?
Mm-hmm. So I've basically known nothing else.
So, people know you from that. People know your sense of humor. People know that you've got an amazing love of music.
Right.
And we'll talk about all those different things here today on the show, and who knows where else we'll wind up going.
Who knows?
But we'll have fun.
Right. Sounds good.
We'll have fun.
Yeah.
So, Chip, one of the things that we should talk a little bit about, and I think that, is a big part of who you are. And it's something that helped, I don't want to say define your life, but certainly helped guide it, was something that happened to you when you were a very, very young child.
Yeah.
And, and you don't run from it. You talk about it. Polio.
Yeah, I was 8 years old and contracted polio, and that was back when it was, nobody knew anything except scared to death of it. And I still vividly remember I was sitting at the dinner table and got nauseous and sick, just like you'd have a flu. Went to bed, and then in those days the doctor came to the house, and he said that's what he thought it was. And the interesting thing, I had to go for a spinal tap, and so we went over to the old Lynchburg General Hospital, which was on Hollinsville Road at the time, and I had to lay perfectly still for, I forget, maybe it was 12 hours, and they do the spinal tap. But the interesting thing was I walked in with my mother and father, and my father had to carry me out. Oh. So I never walked again that way. And so I have always thought there was something funny about that spinal tap, and until I was a lot older, doctors wouldn't talk about it, but one of them finally did tell me that that's a sensitive situation. So, it may have had something to do with it, but I don't look back on it as any problem. It really changed everything about me in life.
And, and we talked about this before we started recording, but in preparation for this conversation, you and I have known each other a long time.
Yes.
And I've always considered you a mentor, and we can get into a lot of the different stuff that you helped me with, whether you knew it or not.
Yeah, I don't know that I knew it.
But, I mean, I've known you from a long time. But in preparing for this, I spoke with some of your, or all of your kids, and some of your in-laws and family members, and the whole
deal. They'll pay later.
So yeah, I've got some interesting stuff that we're going to get into. I've got some interesting stuff that we're going to get into. But we started with the polio, and like you said, that had a dramatic impact on your life at a very young age. So,
interestingly, I don't know if it made for a good story, but my parents always told me that I caught it 2 weeks before the Salk vaccine came out.
Oh, really?
Now, I don't know if that's true, but it makes a good story. But But yeah, a lot of things changed. When I look back at that, I feel like that I would have been the one who would have been the football player and maybe done something with football. But who knows? I might have gone into the military and been drafted or whatever. So it changed all of that, and so that would have possibly changed who I married and what I did. So it was a definite change in my life, which I never let it bother me. I rode bicycles, took dance lessons, and did all that stuff.
You mentioned the military, you mentioned football. I think your dad did both of those things.
He did that, yes.
Before being a state
in the Navy,
agent.
and then played football in high school and state championship for EC class.
And obviously the polio prevented you from doing that.
Yes.
So you found a different path, and one of the outlets, I'm assuming, is music.
Yeah, although I don't play anything except the radio, but I love music, and it's I can't do it. Music plays in my house. If I'm awake, music's playing at the office, everywhere. So I really enjoy that. So yeah, I just found out that, and I think really, in some ways, if I look back, I think that probably having had polio and some form of course, a disability, that I was more determined. I remember growing up, I was determined to do everything I could do to be just like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I played football, and some of the guys said they'd worried about tackling me because it might hit my brace. but I tried.
That might hurt them more than you.
Well, exactly. But I've just tried to do everything exactly the way anybody else would do. And I remember that it was I always felt sorry for the young women, ladies, girls in high school who had polio, because some of them wore 2 braces and they had to wear dresses, and I could wear pants, and it was, so I felt like they were a lot worse and more inhibited than I was.
So, as you're kind of dealing with this, and I can relate in a lot of ways. I had scoliosis and a number of different back and hip and foot operations, and kind of the same deal. I felt like hey, I'm not going to let this stop me. I still want to do things, and for lack of a better term, wanted to be treated as normally as possible.
Exactly.
But there are still some advantages, and and this is one of the areas where I'll give you credit for, and my kids thank you for it, by the way.
Okay.
But you talked me into getting a handicap parking pass.
Oh, yeah.
And you just said, hey, look, even if you never use it except every once in a while, you're entitled to it. And
yes.
And your family's the same way. Anytime you go somewhere, it's...
Well, I'm the most popular guy in a carpool. I mean, everybody wants to ride with me. But I don't use it on my license plate. I use the tag because I don't want to ride around town with a handicapped parking tag. I mean, that's just not me. But when I need it, I can just put it on the mirror. And I found as I've gotten older, my mobility, which is natural, has worsened. So I need it more now than I used to. But yeah, that's. I mean, it's like in the military. If you smoke them if you got them.
And then that led to something else that I've heard a ton of fun stories about.
Oh gosh.
One of the ways you get around.
Today, yeah, now, not in the early days.
Not in the early days,
because
but
I didn't
nowadays.
need to. In the early days, I could do anything I wanted to. Traveling with State Farm and going to all the European cities and stuff, I would walk and do until my brace would rub on my leg and I had to wrap towels. I was going to go and do, and I could do that. But now today, my mobility is not as good. So about 8, maybe 10 years ago, I bought a Segway, and so that's my handicapped vehicle, which originally it wasn't there, but now it's listed in the ADA, and so places and people have to let me in with it. Concerts, any venues I go to, they have to, and it's an easy way for me to do it. If I travel, I can't fly it because of the hazmat batteries. So when I go to Las Vegas or San Francisco or somewhere, I lease one, and it worked great. I mean, it becomes my mode of operandi, and I can go anywhere anybody else wants to go.
And my understanding is you have quite a bit of fun on it.
Unfortunately, I do twirls and things, and every accident I've ever had, alcohol was involved.
So no DUIs on a Segway?
No DUIs on the Segway.
Note to self.
No. Oh my God.
Note to self. That's good to know.
But and listen, it's a fun vehicle, and I have to tell people, they see me come up on it, and of course I'm standing on it, they can't tell anything. And I tell them, yes, it is fun. Segway has something they call the Segway smile, and when you're riding it, you're going to be smiling. But I tell them that's not the reason I'm using it, you know. So it worked great.
Tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up, you know, with the brace on the leg, and I mean, obviously, your family obviously accepts you the way you are. Right?
Well,
I mean, that's kind of natural, but growing up must have been tough.
Well, I didn't think it was tough. That's the thing. You're a kid, you know, now. And I've said many times, it's just a way of life for me. Everything I do since 8 years old, I don't know any different. If you today or anybody nowadays all of a sudden overnight lost a leg, became paralyzed or anything, they'd have a tough time. But I had an uncle who was a world-famous cardiologist, president of the Heart Association, spoke all over the world, and my father's brother, and he told my parents that anything that kid wants to do, you let him do. There was a tree in the front yard, and they said if he wants to climb that tree, you don't try to stop him. He will know his own limitations. And so I really credit him and then my parents because they didn't baby me and smother me. They let me do what I wanted to do. In some cases, made me do. You know, if you want something, go get it. You know, and I think that's the difference. So many parents, obviously, with a child with a handicap, their hearts go out and they smother them and take care of them, and I think keep them from doing what they could do. So yeah, it didn't. And again, I had a desire to be as normal as any way I could. You know, in elementary school, I took dance lessons with all the rest of the kids, rode bicycles, played sandlot football with the guys. You know, and that's what I wanted to do. You know,
we're talking a bunch about handicaps or disabilities or birth defects or whatever the case might be. But, you know, it occurs to me everybody's got something, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be mental or internal or external or whatever the case might be. And there's always oh, man, how do they deal with that? But you deal with it because you have to, right? I mean, you have no choice. So you just go out, you do the best you can, and let the chips fall where they may.
You do, and I tried something different. I know that anytime you're around somebody who's got a handicap or some situation, people don't know how to handle that. They don't know what to say. They don't know whether they're going to hurt their feelings, insult them, or do something. So I found that the more I made fun of it and talked about it, the more comfortable I made somebody else. So, you know, if I talked about being a gimp leg or going to somebody, you don't look at handicap park, boy, look at all the parking places taking a lot of gimp legs here tonight. You know, if I make fun of it, it puts them at ease, and then they can then they can relax and talk about it and not worry.
I know the first time you did that around me, it was kind of like, wow, and then you know, it's. You know, like even today, it's something we can talk about.
Well, exactly.
Because you're very upfront about it. You're very open about it. As a matter of fact, one of the jokes that you've made about it, which kind of cracked me up, was you talked about your daughter Caroline being you with two good legs.
Oh, yeah. Well, going further back, I wouldn't see this, but when they were young, and I had to walk from the street to my house. And the kids would be walking behind me. My girls would be walking behind me, and they'd be limping just like me. And one of them even said they wanted for Christmas a brace. You know, so it just, they saw it that way. But so Caroline is so much like me, both liking music. She's the type A personality that I am, hyper, on the go all the time. And so one of my friends, somebody was asking him, said, boy, I said, that Caroline said, Chip spit her out of his mouth. She is a spitting image of Chip. And he just never broke smile or anything. He just said, Caroline's Chip Harvey with two good legs. So God put a governor on him and turned her wide open.
And of course, 3 kids.
3 kids, yeah.
Dodd, your
Caroline,
son,
and Dory, yeah.
Dodd, Caroline, and Dory. And we'll talk a little bit more about them because, like I said, they gave me some good stories.
I can
they
only
gave
imagine.
me some good stories. You lost your wife, Betsy Ann.
8 years ago.
8 years ago.
Yeah.
I was going to say almost a decade ago.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know how important she was to you. And
Yep.
tell
We were
me
next
about-
door neighbors. We were best of friends. She'd go on a date. This was in high school. Now, she'd go on a date. I'd go on a date or out with the guys or whatever and come back home, living next door to each other. And on Lansing Avenue, these houses were really close together. They weren't like you see them in subdivisions today. But and so many times I'd end up going over to her house and we'd sit up until 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock talking and et cetera. And we're just best of friends. And so, yeah, that she became such an important part of my life. And obviously knew me well. Like I tell people, there were no secrets. We were friends long before we were married or had any emotional involvement. So really, I think that works well. I've told many a person that you almost need to be friends with the person you're going to marry before you marry them, because that's if you're going to be with them for a long time. They need to be good friends.
I knew her a little bit.
Right.
And one of the interesting stories Dory told me was that maybe a day or two before Betsy Ann passed,
Yeah.
she looked at Dory and she looked at her and she said, "You girls are going to have your hands full." True story?
She said, "You'll find out. You'll hear." Not only them, but my good friends Jerry and Doris Brownman. She'd tell Doris, "You'll know. You'll hear." And so sometimes now we're out and I'm getting them to do something and they'll go, "I know now." I know. So yeah, that's the case.
And to get the help of your daughters and daughter-in-law,
Right.
I understand they all have your credit card.
I'm afraid they do. Well, it was easier than them buying something for me and me transacting cash. We did that for a while, and then finally I said, it's just easier. You can just take a card, and now you can go buy. If you're going to buy for me, you can charge it on the card, and I haven't got to transact the money. So that's worked out well.
And they're more willing to do stuff for you than they are their own husbands or families.
Well, their husbands would tell you that.
They did.
No, I don't tell you that. I know that's exactly.
They did.
Dodd likes to say that for birthdays and Christmas and et cetera, they each get a check. But Sophia's has a decimal point in the wrong, different place from his. Well, you know what I've always heard?
Man, that sounds word for word.
Word for word. Well,
To the story that I heard. What
I've always heard is money is not the most important thing in the world, but it sure keeps the kids close.
All right, tell me about State Farm, because I understand before you were a State Farm agent, or maybe when you were just first getting started, you owned a stereo store.
I did. I worked at B&W for 3.5 years, and a close friend of mine, Wayne Richardson, who is still alive today, and a good friend. I worked in both the metallurgical lab and then with my friend Wayne in the spectrographic lab, and I knew then that I wanted to be a State Farm. I worked for my father in the office during summers and stuff, so I liked it, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I worked at B&W, and then while there, my friend and I decided to open a stereo shop, and I knew all about equipment and speakers and amplifiers. In Lynchburg, nobody had a high-end stereo shop. You had Radio Shack and you had stuff, but we opened a shop that was high-end, Bose speakers, acoustic research speakers, all the top names in equipment, and nobody had it. And so really we enjoyed that and sold a lot of friends equipment and talked to them about equipment and sound and et cetera. And of course then later, as more and more places began to take on that, where you could buy it anywhere, we weren't the only shop in town carrying high-end equipment. And then, of course, I went with State Farm, and I realized it was hard to do both. And I knew State Farm's what I wanted to do. So I ended up we sold or closed the stereo shop. But that's how I knew so much about sound equipment and music and et cetera, and learned about the sounds, the high frequencies, low frequencies, and et cetera. And still today, many times I'm at a function with a band, and if they don't have a sound man or somebody there, sometimes they'll come over and get me to let them know if vocals need to go up or if they need high frequencies or bass or different things, So.
Yeah, and obviously, and we'll talk about your love of music coming up in a little bit, but that's obviously carried forth. So even though you're still not doing the stereo store, your love of music's still a big part of who you are.
Yeah, even my cars. My wife used to say the only reason I bought the cars I did is it the stereo system in it, and I went from 11 speakers in one car to 17 speakers, and now I've got 21 speakers in this new Genesis. So
that's a lot of speakers.
That's a lot of speakers,
and
I'm not afraid to crank it.
And you could tell the difference.
Oh yeah.
Back to State Farm for just a second, because you were starting in State Farm. You closed your stereo business because more competition was coming in, and you said just a second ago you always wanted to be a State Farm agent.
Well, I knew at B&W that's what I was going to do. So I was biding time. State Farm in those days did not want you. They didn't want to hire an agent who didn't have some life experience. They wanted you to be closer to 25 and preferably married. You can't do all that today, and have some life experience. And so I was down there marking time, 3.5 years, and everybody I worked with knew that's what I was going to do. So I had no idea at all of staying there. And and it worked out. It was like 3.5 years before I made the move, was able to make the move. And interestingly, I didn't go to college. I didn't even do well in high school. My kids laugh now that they say, did it really take you 5 years to get a VC glass? And I said, well, I went to summer school every year because I played around. I did not like studying. I did not like homework. I was the type of person, I needed to see some direct correlation. I know this is stupid today, but I would often say, and I said this is crazy, but I'd say, I don't care why Hannibal crossed the Alps with elephants. It didn't make any sense to me. I realize now that's history, and you've got to know that stuff, or you're destined to relive it. But it's funny that once I went with State Farm, I studied and read and absorbed like a sponge, because I could read something in the morning, having coffee, and you might ask me about it before the day was out. I could see a direct correlation, and I loved it and knew what I wanted to do. And so it seemed to have purpose there.
So you loved it. You knew you wanted to be a State Farm agent. What about it did you love? What about it made you want to be an agent? Because for most people, right, and you know this, it's who don't you want to talk to at a party? The insurance guy.
Insurance guy, I know.
Right? I mean,
yeah.
I would guess that there aren't a lot of kids who grow up aspiring to be an insurance agent. It's not the sexiest thing in the world. No. It's not, I mean, it's a joke to a lot of people, but for you, it was a passion.
Well, and what you hear the joke a lot about is life insurance. Sometimes it's just, well, with State Farm, we sell auto, fire, home, life, health, business, everything. But probably because I worked in my father's office in some summers and things, and liked it, and I like the idea of helping people. When they, and I tell my staff now, when somebody has a claim, it's a lot more fun to say, and they call and they're all upset, they're nervous, they're worried. It's a lot more fun to say, don't worry, we got you covered. It's not fun to deny a claim, because the coverage isn't there, the policy doesn't cover that. But the reward is really helping people to help them in situations where they see a devastating event happening, and we're able to come in and help them get their life back together. Now, and that's just on property and casualty. And of course, life insurance, as you know, would be for people who are changing things for their children and their spouse and et cetera. But by having it all, you had something to talk about to everybody. And of course, auto insurance was mandatory. Banks wouldn't lend you anything on a home unless you had insurance. So a lot of it, they had to be there, and you could talk to them about everything.
And obviously, and I think we're seeing this more and more, and maybe a reversion back to the older days where people would deal with a local agent, right? Because of the accessibility, because of the customer service, rather than dialing a toll-free number and talking with someone in another country or someone who doesn't speak English or AI or, going through the phone tree. I mean, to be able to pick up the phone and call your office when something happens is worth its weight in gold, because when people are collecting and you talk about claims, but something bad has happened. That's what insurance is there for, right?
It is. And just as you said, normally people don't like insurance until they need it. And then they start liking it. But they don't understand it always. They don't know what they need and don't need, whether it's car insurance, automobile insurance, homeowners insurance, business, health, different things. So I think I read an item when nobody needs insurance until they do. And so they like having somebody they can contact, sit down and talk to. And I've never ever been a high pressure person. I don't sell that way. I'll educate you and talk to you about what you should have and shouldn't have, and usually that way, once you understand it, then you realize the things you need. But I think that's the thing. It's very rewarding to help people, and I've seen tragic situations. I've seen them come in with lawsuits, bringing the papers in. They're white as a sheet, because their assets are flashing before their eyes. Homes that are totally destroyed by fire, water, that type thing, and they don't think that it'll ever be the same.
Is there one specific example that you can point to, maybe early in your career, that validated your decision to get into State Farm because of that rewarding, aspect that you were talking about something happened to someone, whether it be a car accident or a loved one passed away or whatever, and that insurance and your ability to help them really just made a huge difference and really, like I said, validated your decision to do that?
Well, yeah, I was called one morning early, and there was a bad fire in a home, and it was a young couple, and they'd already called the fire department, et cetera. So I got dressed and went straight out to the house and saw the young couple, and the wife was all crying and et cetera. And it's amazing that when I got there, they hugged me, because you see, I was the symbol of anything that's going to help them. And as we walked through the house, I'd been through this type situation before, when something as tall as a corner cupboard was reduced to ashes on the floor that you step over, and the walls are dripping in dirty smoke, and everything's just nasty. The smell, the stench, and here I'm telling them, understand, this is all going to be put back, and as a matter of fact, it's going to be put back so that it'll actually be better than it was before it happened, especially if the house had a few years of age on it. And of course, they couldn't understand it. Well, in this particular case, I told the wife that, and as I left, she gave me a hug, and her husband told me, a day or two later. She said, when you told her that and you left, she told me, crying, said, I know he means well, but it'll never be the same. And, of course, it was. And when you see that change going from just disastrous back to completely changed, it was such a rewarding feeling to help them and be there for them, and be there at the very moment that the crisis in their life was taking place.
Flip it around. Has there been an incident that's the opposite? Someone you had recommended some sort of insurance to, and they didn't get it, or it lapsed, or whatever, and then there was an incident and they weren't covered?
Yeah, that's always the case, and that's the reason I impress and demand that my staff always put notes in the file, because I've found that people's memories are very short, especially if their back's against the wall, and all they can remember, and you're having to tell them, you never bought that coverage. We talked about it, but you didn't buy it. And all they remember is, I remember we discussed it, and usually I put in the notes what the cost was. And they'll say, well, I just know. Yeah, I remember we talked about it. I can't believe it. I know I would have bought that. And I'll have to say, let me read you what you told me. And we put quotes. And it's not fun because, but if you don't have the notes, that's to cover my rear end. But that's a sad situation, and now we tell the people when we talk to them, you don't have to buy this. If it's up to you. If you don't, that's fine. We're just going to document the notes that we talked to you, highly recommended it, but you chose at this point in time for whatever reason not to buy it. And that alone sometimes scares them a little bit, But no, it is unsettling to have somebody that you've got to tell that, I'm sorry, it's just not covered. Now, it's one thing to tell them it's not covered because the policy doesn't cover it, but it's another thing to tell them it's not covered because you didn't take what we told you should have or the limits of amounts that you should have.
I don't want to get too in the weeds as far as insurance goes.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you this. Is there one or two things that you think people misunderstand or don't know about insurance or certain policies or what they cover? Anything that you feel folks, just some advice for people or things that they need to know about insurance?
Well, I think insurance is, it'd be like, is there something about the legal world and a lawyer that you don't know? Yeah, it is. It's all there. And as you said earlier, insurance is a necessary evil. And so many people buy it. They don't like it. Nobody ever expects to have a loss. Nobody ever expects those things to happen. So they're buying it because they have to have it. And they don't really want to know too much about it. Just, I know I need it and I got to have it. Sometimes because it's the auto, which insurance is required by the state, or it's homeowners because the bank's not going to lend them the money. Yeah, just give it to me and let's get this deal done. And so they don't know and understand. And I think that's where it's up to me and people like me as an agent to explain to them a little more in depth and to be there then when something does happen. And we get the crazy questions. Sometimes it's not even a loss, but something happens to a neighbor or a friend and makes them think, well, would I be covered if something like that happened? And I think there again, that's the rewarding part of the job. And I've had many a staff person, one in particular I remember where they worked with a person and there was a problem between California, that they had some insurance out there, they had some insurance here, something didn't get done properly, didn't get transferred, and we saw the problem. And it wasn't even our fault. It wasn't even, and she was helping iron it out and get it, calling the agents out there. The agents might have been another state and Virginia too. And finally, it took 2 or 3 days, and she came into my office and she said, I finally got that worked out. They're all happy. We got it straightened out. And I said, let me ask you something. I said, did it make you feel good? And she said, well, yeah, it did. And I said, now, you didn't make a dime, and I didn't make a dime, because all we did was help them. But I said, that's the rewarding part of the job. That's what makes you feel good and makes you stay in the business, is helping the people. It's not all about the money. The money will come. I've never, in 56 years, and I can honestly say this, and anybody knows me on it, I really don't know what I make on. I mean, I do now on some things, but when I'm talking to you about a policy or something, the thought of the income never comes into my mind. My idea is always, if I do what's right, take care of you, treat you right, advise you properly, the money will come. And my father, who was a State Farm agent before me, he didn't tell me too many things, but he told me one thing. He said, always remember, you're always going to know more than the client you're talking to. And he said, it's going to be many times you could talk to him about buying a little extra something here or there because you'd make a few more bucks. He said, eventually that will come out reputation-wise. He said, if you always do for the client what you would do for yourself, if they don't need something, tell them. If they've got an older car that's really old and they might not need collision on it, tell them. And he said, that'll come back to you 10 times over. And that's what I've seen. It's just be very honest with them and treat them as if it was your mother that you were advising on any type of insurance.
56 years you've been a State Farm
May 1st
agent?
was 56 years.
So 56 years, no real sign of slowing down. You may get into the office a little bit later nowadays.
The problem is,
may
Rich,
leave a little earlier.
Now they got me coming in. I'm going a little earlier than normal. They don't know what to think. But yeah, retirement's not in my vocabulary, and I had some fellow agents email me congratulations. They announce it out during each time. Congratulations, and I'd say it's been a great ride, but I'm not getting off the train yet.
Why?
And one of them said, I want to be around for number 60.
Why no retirement?
Well, really, for me, a couple reasons. One, I did lose my wife 8 years ago, and winning the trips and things that I used to do, that's not fun anymore for that. Plus, so because of the polio situation, I can't play tennis. I stopped playing golf a number of years back, and so what am I going to do? I mean, I love my work. I love the people. I love my staff. What am I going to do? Sit around the house and just wait for death to slip up on me? I mean, it's just not something I want to do. So I find that staying active, I think it keeps me healthy. It keeps my mind sharp. And I never dread going to work. I always look forward to it.
One of the things that I understand you do, and like I said earlier, I mean, you've been a huge help to me. At one point, I left radio and became a financial advisor, and it's not quite the same as State Farm, but I looked at State Farm, and you've always been there to help, give advice, whatever. But you do that for a lot of people, a lot of young agents as well that you try to help with, and technically they're competitors of yours. Yeah,
I mean, when they get their agency, they're going to be competitors in a way, but I don't bump into fellow State Farm agents competitive-wise that much. But I try to talk to the young. They'll send me young agents and people who want to go in the business. They'll come out to talk to me. And I'll tell them, I can't talk to you about the new contracts that you're going in on. I can't talk to you about what's required of you today, because that was different for me. But what I can talk to them about is the history of the company. I've never seen State Farm do anything wrong very long. In other words, they make mistakes. They'll come up with certain things, and when it's not right, they change it. And I think there's a high degree of trust between the company and the agent, back and forth. And so I can talk to them about that and about trusting management and the company. sticking to what they do. Young people today are very impatient. They want everything, and I've had them, how long will it take me to have what you've got? And I go, whoa, you're jumping way the gun. Back in time when I was young, I had to go out and put flyers on doors and windshields and hunt for business. So you've got to pay your dues, but just do it in the right way, and it'll keep coming back to you. So I think I enjoy trying to help the young agents. And we'll go out of our way. My staff knows this. If they have a problem and call our office, we'll do anything we can to help them. Even to the point I've sent secretaries over to their office to help them do something. It comes back to you.
So, for someone who's interested in, I don't know, maybe they want to be an insurance agent, maybe they want to get into financial advising. Maybe they want to get into mortgages, but some sort of sales. And I think you've already touched on this to a degree, but in terms of being honest with people, telling them what they really need, not trying to upsell them stuff they don't need, that all comes back to you. You were pretty clear about that. What other advice do you give younger people who are trying to get into the business or sales world?
You mean in general?
Just in general, not necessarily, insurance and specifically, but
Well, I think number one, I feel like they've got to. It's got to be a field that they truly love and they want to be in. I took Dale Carnegie when I got into business in 1969. I took Dale Carnegie that year, and I've never forgotten that Dale Carnegie always said, find something you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. And that's still what I see today. I don't call this work. And so, you can take a job because you make a lot of money, but if your heart's not in it, you're not going to last long. So I'll sometimes just try to talk to them about, is this something you love to do that you can see yourself doing for a long time? And I'll tell you that the interesting thing about State Farm is the majority of State Farm agents, but big majority, is they don't leave. Now you get them. If they leave, it's going to be in the first year or two where they realize maybe they didn't get in something they should do. But the turnover is very, very low because they get in it, they like it, and they do well. But and in any field, I think that's important. Is this something you feel like you can do, that you want to do, and you can see it's kind of a love for something for you to do?
One of my kids asked me not long ago, and I won't say which one, but people who know them will know.
Right.
But again, flashing back to when I used to be a financial advisor.
Right.
And he came up to me and he asked me, and he goes, "You used to be a financial advisor, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "So if you would have stuck with that, by now we'd have a beach house and a lake house, and because financial advisors tend to do pretty well."
Right.
And same with insurance agents over a long period of time, right? Financially the rewards are there, but the point you made earlier about really truly loving what you do, it's so important. It's so important.
It is. If you don't, then you're going to end up with negative attitudes. You're going to end up. It's going to read out across to the clients, to the public. I think people are smart. They can tell when you love what you do, when you're sincere about what you say and do. Here again, you can't be impatient, but over time, it reads through that the advice you're giving them makes sense, and that you're not doing it just for the money. Because I would tell you just as quick as I would to buy something as I would tell you to drop something. If here you're driving a car that's 22 years old and you're still carrying collision on it, should you be doing that? I make a commission on it, but it's probably not a good move for you. Let's look at dropping that collision. Rates are high. Let's look at should you drop it. But now let's look at what you can afford. And so my idea is that I like to say that I like to stimulate your thought process. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but let me just educate you and stimulate your thought process. And then as a result of that, you'll make your own decisions.
This is going to sound overly cheesy, and I kind of hate the fact that it's even going to come out of my mouth. But you touched on the fact you have no desire to retire. You like what you do. You
Right.
like having a purpose in life.
Right.
Because of the polio in the leg, there are a lot of other activities that you can't do.
Right.
So the working, sort of fulfills a
Yeah.
lot of things
Yeah.
for you. You're a guy who you genuinely love life.
I do. I love life. People tease me that on Fridays I go out every Friday night.
Mm-hmm. Where?
Well, I'll go anywhere, but right now, recently, it's been to Oakwood Club. But when I was younger, I thought, and my wife and I both thought we had to go both Friday and Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
As you get older, if there's not something big going on Saturday, it's a little more the effort to get all dressed up to go out. The juice ain't worth the squeeze, But Fridays, if I'm vertical and can fog a mirror, I'm gonna be out. And I tell friends, if you find me home on Friday night, better call witness because something ain't right, But that's the way I feel. My hair gets kinky about 3:00 on Friday because I'm thinking about going out just like it did in high school. I love Fridays. When I have a choice to take off on Monday or Friday to close the office, I'd close Monday every day of the week because I like Friday, and I also have, and this is a true fact. I've learned it, I've lived it and learned it. But social activity is vital as people get older. They've got to have social activity. If you recluse yourself and stay at home and don't go and do, it's not healthy. It's not healthy physically. It's not healthy mentally. And there's nothing better than social activity. And so, my Friday nights, and if something's going on there, last weekend I was gone all 3 nights, Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. So I can still do that. I find my recovery time sometimes longer, but I can still do it and like to do it. But it's just that social activity, being around friends and people. And especially if you've lost your wife or your husband, I think it's very important to stay active and have friends and socialize.
And a big part of that for you is, and we talked about it earlier, music, right? You love music. We've talked about that.
Yep.
Whether it be at Oakwood or if there are different local bands playing, but I mean, you're always going to different concerts.
Right.
And you're bringing family, you're bringing friends, you're making it a big event.
Right. This past Thursday, Caroline Dory and I drove to Durham, North Carolina, to see Vince Gill in concert. Played 3 hours and 15 minutes without taking a break, and then we had a drive home. Got home about 1:30, 1:45. But I mean, I wouldn't take anything for it. The experience is great. The last 2 Januaries I've flown out to Las Vegas 2 years ago to see U2 at the Sphere, and this past January to see the Eagles at the Sphere. I mean, there's something about it. And you remember Bill O'Reilly that was on Fox News for a long time, and he used to end his show with a word of a tip for life or something. And one time he said that he had just gone to some big concert, probably at it was in New York, so it might have been at the what's the big arena there, the
Madison
Square Garden. But he said, do yourself a favor. He said, if you've got a group or band or somebody that you really like, he said, I know they're not cheap. Pay the money and go. He said, it's almost a life-altering experience to be there and see it. And I think it is. So we may, and it's what I really like is all 3 of my children love music like I do. They go more than I do. And I feel like I had something to do with that because music has played at my house. If you went right this minute, left me sitting here and drove over to my house and went in the back door, music's playing. Nobody's home. music's playing. It'll be playing when I walk in. It won't go off till I go to bed. It'll be on in the morning when I get up.
What kind of music?
I like different genres. I mean, I play soft rock. I play regular rock, blues, R&B. Music, I think, music sets a mood. If you're having dinner, if you're having a cocktail hour somewhere, maybe soft jazz, smooth jazz. Then dinner, you want dinner music. If you're in a party frame of mind, I think music just changes everything and sets the tone for what the evening is.
What was the Sphere like?
Sphere is unbelievable. I would not want to see every band I like at the Sphere because the Sphere is so big and it's all the way up as high as you can see, tall and as wide as you can see. The screen is as big as 3 football fields, the largest LED screen in the world. And then down here in the bottom is this what looks like this little postage stamp stage. But you're looking up here because it's all big as life and clear as a bell. So Vince Gill said when he was interviewed, I've always heard a lot of times bands don't really like to play weddings because bands feed off of the audience, and the more interactive they are, but at a wedding, the star of the show is the bride and the groom, and the wedding party, and the dance with the father and the mother, and etc. So bands are back there just playing like background music. So Vince Gill, they asked him, what was it like to play at the Sphere? And he said, that was the largest audience I've ever been ignored by. Because they're not looking down at him, They're looking at the magnificent thing that goes on. So yeah, I enjoy it and loved it, but if I really want to see the Eagles being probably my overall favorite band or any group, that's not the best way to see them because you're there to experience the Sphere.
How did it go getting into the Sphere for you?
My Segway. I could get in there, and there again, you're talking about the handicap. You can handicap parking or Uber, and take the Segway and go right in, and they take you right up. It's because it's a lot of. First time I went in January of 24, we went in the Venetian Hotel, and I had the Segway. I had at least one, but I swear you could walk at least a football field or more from the Venetian Hotel across this little wide indoor bridge to get over to the Sphere. And I mean, if you've got any mobility issue, you can't do it. So, but yeah, it's and they know how to handle people out there.
I've heard it's also important to have tickets for the right night.
God, they did tell you everything. I've never in all my years been to a concert and not had the ticket for the right night until we went out to see U2. And we went through all the crowd, all the stuff, right up to the gate. And I hear them up there say, what do you mean it's not tonight? And they, between Dory and Dodd or somebody, they'd gotten the ticket. Thank God it was for the next night.
Not the night before.
Not the night before.
Yeah, you missed it. It was a great show. You really should have been here.
So we had to go do something else and come back the next night, But no, it's just, it is. If it's somebody you really like to see on a group of artists, I'm trying to line up Rod Stewart again. I've seen him 2 or 3 times. It is. It's just something about, like people will tell you, like going to a football game. You can watch it on television better than you can see it, but there's something about being there. Automobile racing, something about being there if you like it, and I think concerts are the same way.
Did you say the Eagles were your favorite band?
Overall, I think my favorite band. Yeah, I've seen them back in their heyday when they were just young, long-haired kids, and I've seen them now probably 5 or 6 times since they came back on the Hell Freezes Over tour.
All right, so Eagles are your favorite band. What's your favorite song? And it doesn't have to be an Eagles song.
That's just hard for me to say. I mean, of course, everybody likes Hotel California, but I don't know, because if you're listening to blues, or if you're listening to R&B or jazz or country.
All right, let me ask it this way: you're listening to a music station on the radio, not WLNI, for some reason. What song comes on the radio and you just tell everybody in the car to just shut up because you want to listen? Is there one?
Well, I'll tell you what. It's what type song. There are certain songs that come on the radio, but certain songs you hear anywhere. That what I like is if it makes you start tapping your feet and moving, which is usually going to be an up-tempo dance type song. If you go back in time, it could be Otis Redding or Wilson Pickett or some of those guys, the dance songs that you can't sit still to, that just moves you. I always heard about Wilson Pickett that said, don't blow your nose, let Wilson Pickett. But anyway, that I think that's what you feel it. You feel the music. Now, if it's dinner music, you do want that to be nice and soft in background while people are having dinner. Cocktail time can be soft rock or smooth jazz of some type. So it's just hard to. It depends on what I'm doing, but it's funny if I'm somewhere and hear music, my ear's still picking it up in the background. And I'll tell you this. Stop and think about this, Rich. So now basically I've lived by myself for the last 8 years, but it's I think impossible to feel bad and hear music that you like. You can't do both at the same time. You can't be feeling down and bad and feeling music, and I think maybe that's why I play it all the time. I just it just keeps you upbeat and positive.
So if you're having a bad day, play some music you like, and you think that'll change people's moods?
I think it will. And they're saying now with so much dementia going on, and I've seen this personally, people with dementia that can't remember what they ate for breakfast, and you can play some music that they learned and grew and knew, they'll jump up and dance and move to the music and sing the words. It's amazing how it crosses all barriers.
I heard, you can of course correct me if I'm wrong, I heard at one point you considered running for city council and your wife shut that down pretty quickly. Right about now, you're feeling good that she shut that down, right?
Damn right I am. Oh, yeah. I remember one day at the office, in walks, good golly, Steve Duman, Preston Bryant, there's like 5 of them. And I'm going, well, guys, what are y'all doing out here? And they came in, a little small talk, and then they said, we want you to run for city council out in your ward. I won't mention the name, but it was a liberal individual that said, we think you can beat her easily. And of course, you know what it does. It pumps your adrenaline up and gets you go, good golly. So I said, and we know you can do it. We'll help you and do all that stuff. And I said, well, let me at least talk to my wife, see what she thinks. So I went home that night, and I'm all pumped up. And I said, guess who came to see me? And I'm listing all the names. And she said, what do they want? And I said, they came out and want me to run for city council against so-and-so. She said, it didn't take you 3 minutes to say no, did it? And I said, I'm going, oh, what? She said, they'd have pictures of you being drug out of the tea room, the Dahlia, Oakwood. All of a sudden I went, what was I thinking? Back to reality. And now you see it every day. And that's why it's hard to get good people to run for anything, because they go back as far as they can, and it's terrible.
What's your read on city council right now? I don't know how politically involved you are with city politics or whatever, but it's crazy.
I'm not as really involved there, but I just know it's all this bickering and back and forth and stuff is just not good. I hate to see that, and I know it makes the headlines, and you have one up against the other and making bad remarks and snide remarks and insinuating remarks, and it's not good for the city's reputation.
It's kind of embarrassing, isn't it?
Well, it is. I know it is. It is. And now all this stuff about the real estate taxes and whether they're going to equalize it, or somebody said you're going to give you a credit for your personal property tax on cars, but it's only for a $20,000 car. You can't hardly buy. It's hard to buy a used car for $20,000.
That's the
so
truth.
Anyway, I don't think that's been settled yet. But yeah, I don't like to see all that stuff going on.
Chip, lots of people know you for being a State Farm agent. 56 years. Your mug's up on billboards everywhere. Your voice is all over the radio.
God. People tell me that all the time. They hear me. Oh, I hear you on the radio all the time. I just tell them, don't worry, I'm not giving up my day job.
People also really know you and appreciate you for your sense of humor. And you've got a million jokes.
I know.
Some are clean, some are not so clean.
Yeah.
The beauty of this format with No Holds Barred is we could play the clean ones on the radio, but the other ones,
I know.
Maybe those are just saved for the video podcast. What do you got? I mean,
well, I think jokes are...
the one that you tell that I remember the most, and I think I even set you up for this once on the sports line back in the day. Chip, what's the good word?
Oh, the good word is legs. Now go spread the good word.
One of my favorites.
But jokes, I think people like to laugh. People need to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's part of it with you, right? I mean, every time people see you, they want to hear the jokes. And you must tell the same ones over and over again, but you never get tired of them. No one else ever gets tired.
Well, my wife certainly had her place in heaven because she'd heard the jokes. People would tell her, you've heard these things 1,000 times and you still laugh, I think part of good joke telling is the delivery. But she would always fuss at me because some of the jokes I would tell, she'd say, Chip, that's locker room stories. You tell them to women. But I had a woman tell me, 2 women one time told me, one of them said, do you know why you're able to tell locker room jokes to women and it doesn't offend them? No. And they said, number one, you laugh at them harder than we do. Mm-hmm. And it clearly shows you don't mean anything by it. Mm-hmm. There's no underlying meaning that you're being insulting. You're laughing harder than anybody else. And so I know that a lot of times I'll go to tell a joke and somebody else who knows it will go, oh, no, Betsy Ann would say, please don't tell that joke, But everybody would laugh and they keep coming back for more. But I guess it's because I don't have any agenda or anything else. You look at somebody like Don Rickles. Mm-hmm. Everybody was fair game to him. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter your sex, age, religion, race, didn't matter. Everybody, and
that's the way it should be, right?
That's the way it should be.
They are jokes, and I think as a country, we got away from that a while ago.
All the wokeism came in,
right? And
all the pronouns and all that stuff, and so comedians can't be funny.
Where I think it turned, and I may be wrong on this, but it was about a year or so ago, the roast of Tom Brady. Oh, and yeah. I don't know if you saw it or not, and I'm not a Tom Brady guy.
It was even hard for me to watch. Some of it was pretty rank.
It was very.
I almost was embarrassed.
But the fact that they did it again and knowing that, hey, look, these are jokes and we're having a good time, and yes, they may be a little offensive if you take it too seriously, but at some point we have to all sit back and be able to laugh at ourselves a little bit too, don't we?
Well, you do. I think you have to. You have to be, self-deprecating, and that goes back to what I told you about with the handicap. I have to play off and tease on that all the time, to make sure people are comfortable. But comedians, they have a hard time now. They can't. I'll go back and I'll see now a skit done by Don Rickles or some of those guys, and they're so funny, but they couldn't do it today, I don't think. They'd be drummed out of town. But yeah, I think the jokes make people laugh, and no matter what their mood is, if they're down a little bit or depressed a little bit, and they laugh, and you can see, telling a joke, usually you can see a deep belly laugh. They're not just going, I mean, they're laughing almost to the point of uncontrollably. And there are obviously some people more fun to tell jokes to because their laugh's infectious, you know. But and then, of course, once you tell them a lot like I do, you develop a reputation, and everybody wants to come up and say, I've got one I bet you haven't heard. And
do you humor folks when they do that?
I can't do that, and the reason is, and my wife Betsy Ann used to say all the time, you shouldn't, you ruin the joke for them. Now, so here's the problem with a joke. Everybody's trying to get me on one. So if I let them tell the whole joke, and I go, that's great, yeah, I've heard it, and they're going to say, yeah, sure you have. So the only way you can make sure they know that you knew it is some way you've got to give them something during the joke that they know you know. It's just the way it is, you know. And so right now, I just heard this yesterday. One of your good advertisers, Chef Jason at Milano's, he told my son-in-law just yesterday, saw him, so when he said, I got Chip on a joke he never heard. He said, and they said, you better write it down. He said, I just can't believe I got him on one he hadn't heard. So it's like a star in their crown.
It doesn't happen often, does it?
No, it doesn't happen too often. Because everybody will call me with one, and I guess it just creates an atmosphere.
How do you remember them all?
I don't know. My wife said I couldn't remember what she told me this morning, but I could remember a joke I heard 35 years ago. But I do know this: jokes are.
Well, I mean, we both know, Chip, that a lot of times what your wife says isn't really important anymore.
No, I know. Well, but here's the thing about jokes. Jokes are. I've found over the years their association, because I've had people come up to me just cold turkey, tell me a joke, and you go, well, you know, unless I just heard one, but you give me a topic, you know, usually it's some topic, but jokes are. I remember them by association. When a topic comes up, it reminds me of a joke, but just to cold turkey say. Oh, and the other thing along that line, so if you have two people telling jokes, you tell a joke, it reminds me of a joke. I tell a joke, reminds you of a joke, so you can go back and forth. And one day, we had a local State Farm overnight meeting up at Wintergreen. And they'd flown this female State Farm agent in from Arizona as a personal friend of somebody, and she loved jokes. So after dinner and some various things, they set two wingback chairs up just like we're sitting here and had a joke off. And we told jokes back and forth and back and forth. Most of hers I'd heard, most of mine she'd heard, but we each picked up a few new ones. But the only way you can do that is she'd tell one and made me think of another one. So that it's by association.
In the final few minutes we've got, we got to hear some. We got to hear some. And I've got like two or three that I remember. And I'm always like, you'll tell one, and I'm like, oh, I got to remember that one. The legs one.
The legs one,
I mean, that one I've remembered because
people come up to you all the time. What's the good word?
What's the good word?
And when you've got to come back.
It's priceless. It's priceless. And I had so much fun throwing that one at you on the radio because Kim was here that day too.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh no, please not that one. But
there's some that, some are just slightly risque. I was telling one this morning, actually to my staff, that three little old women sitting on a park bench, and a flasher came up and flashed them.
Right.
And the first little old lady had a stroke. The second little old lady had a stroke. Third little old lady would have had a stroke, but her arms weren't long enough. Teacher's asked little Johnny a math question. Said, Johnny, if you have 5 crows on a wire and you shoot one, how many's left? He said, none, teacher. She said, Johnny, and she held up her hand with 5 fingers and grabbed her thumb and said, you shoot 1 crow. How many are left? He said, none, teacher. She said, do you mind telling me how you arrive at that? He said, no. He said, you shoot 1 crow, they'll all fly away. She said, well, Johnny, that's not mathematically correct, but I like the way you're thinking. He said, let me ask you a question. 3 women sitting on a park bench eating ice cream. The first woman is biting the ice cream. Second woman is licking the ice cream. Third woman is sucking the ice cream. Which one's married? She said, oh, Johnny, God, oh, I'm so embarrassed. I guess it would be the one sucking the ice cream. He said, no, ma'am, it's the one wearing the wedding band, but I like the way you think. Oh, God.
All right, but I need a couple more.
So a priest and a rabbi are flying on an airplane side by side, sitting together. And it's a long flight. And after a while, the priest said, Your Holiness, have you ever succumbed to the temptations and eaten pork? He said, Father, I hate to admit this, but he said, a couple of years ago, I did. I ate a ham sandwich. They just nodding, riding on. Everything's fine. So finally the rabbi said, well, tell me, Father, have you ever succumbed to the temptation of the flesh and had an affair? He said, well, I hate to admit it, but he said, about a year ago, I did. I did have an affair. They riding on along a little bit further, and all of a sudden the rabbi said, beats the hell out of a ham sandwich, doesn't it?
Do you have an all-time favorite?
They're all favorite. Another one just came around talking about flying. So an Irishman and a priest on a plane flying, and stewardess comes by and says, would anybody like a drink? And Irishman, yes, I'll have a whiskey. She came back and brought his whiskey. She turned to the priest and said, sir, would you like a whiskey? He said, I'd rather be savagely raped by 12 whores than to let whiskey touch my mouth. With that, the Irishman stuck his glass and said, me too. I didn't know we had a choice.
I'll take behind what's door number 2.
Yeah. Oh, God, I swear. Oh.
No all-time favorite, though?
Yeah, I don't know what I can tell.
You can tell. We can edit it for radio.
So I like the Irishman. There's 2 Irishmen, Mick and Patty, good buddies. Patty's laid up with a bum knee. So Mick comes by. It reminds me of another 2 of them, I'll tell you. Mick comes by and says, hey, Patty, he said, how might you be doing? I just came by to check on you. And he said, Mick, not doing too well. My knee's all messed up, but would like to ask a favor. He said, sure, Patty, what can I do? He said, my feet are about to freeze. Would you go upstairs and get me slippers? He said, I'd be glad to. So he goes upstairs, and Patty's 2 19-year-old twins are scantily clad laying on the bed. And he said, I think I'll have a little fun with them. So he went in there, and he said, your dad sent me up here to have sex with both of you. One of them said, get out of here. You got to prove it first. He hollered back downstairs and said, Patty, both of them? He said, yeah, you asshole. What's the point of fucking one? Oh, God.
And you said that made you think of another one.
Well, yeah, the one that my son-in-law Max likes. This guy with a speech impediment goes into a nut shop, and the guy behind the counter has got a great big nose. And so the guy goes in, and he said, the guy says, may I help you? He said, yeah, sir. He said, I like my nut. He said, yes, sir, we got plenty. What would you like? He said, how much those cashews up there? He said, those cashews, and I said, they're beautiful. We just got them in. Said, there are no broken parts, all perfect. He said they're $11.95 a pound. No, too high. How about those pecans? He said, now you're really talking. We just got them in from Georgia. Those pecans are perfect. No broken parts, no broken all of them perfect and fresh. And he said, we just got them in. They're $10.50 a pound. No, too high. He said, how about those Spanish peanuts? He said, now you're really talking. We just got them in from Spain. They're beautiful, fresh, and said, just put them on the shelf. And he said, they're $9.75 a pound. No, too high. He said, I just don't think I'm going to buy any nuts today. He said, but I appreciate your help. He turned to go to the door. The guy said, well, wait, stop. I want to thank you. He turned back and he said, you want to thank me? He said, yeah, I want to thank you. He said, what for? He said, you're the first person to come in my nut shop and not make fun of my big nose. He said, nose? He said, your nuts are so high, I thought it was your dick. Oh, God, y'all get me in trouble.
All right, I said I know 3. One of them's yours. The other 2 are real short, real sweet.
Yep.
Dinosaur jokes. You've probably heard them.
I don't know.
What do you call a gay dinosaur? Wow.
Lycopotamus? I'm getting close.
You're very close.
I knew I've heard it, but
you're very close.
Yeah,
You're very close, but you're on the slightly wrong track. A gay dinosaur is a megasaurus.
Oh, okay.
You were answering the other one. What do you call a lesbian dinosaur?
Oh, yeah, Lookalotopus.
Those are the only 2 I knew.
Oh, my word.
Thank you.
But everybody laughed.
Right. It's a good time.
What in the world?
We can't take life too seriously.
You have to laugh and have fun. And like I said, you noticed we laughed at them more than anybody else. Mm-hmm. So it's just no harm meant, all in fun.
It's all in fun.
All in fun.
Got to be able to have fun.
You do. You have to laugh at yourself and laugh at life. And in any serious situation that takes place in life, you just have to roll with it and make a light of it. Our whole country does that. No matter what the tragedy, we make fun of it. And I think that's a way of coping.
Mm.
So I think so humor is so important. In life, in marriage, everything.
Especially in marriage.
That's the truth.
Chip, thank you. A pleasure.
My pleasure. I'm glad to do it. Enjoyed it. And hope we did not even go too far on things.